We're used to hearing some pretty wild numbers from SpaceX, right? Rockets launched, satellites deployed. It's always big. But a recent government filing dropped a number that is so massive, it kind of redefines the word ambitious. Seriously, this isn't just an increase, it's a plan to completely change how we think about space.
1 million. I mean, just let that number hang in the air for a second. 1 million. This isn't, a city's population or some lottery jackpot. This is the number that just showed up in a government filing from SpaceX. And believe me, it represents an ambition that is, well, it's truly mind-bending.
Yep, you heard that right. That's how many satellites SpaceX wants to launch. And not just for anything. They want to create a whole new kind of data center in orbit. This all came out on January 30th in a filing with the FCC. We're talking about a constellation of up to 1 million satellites, with the goal of building a single, massive, interconnected data center that's just floating up there in space.
Okay, so 1 million satellites. We have to break this down. A plan this huge, this audacious, really needs a closer look. What exactly is SpaceX proposing here? And how on Earth, or off Earth, would it even work?
So first off, you gotta understand, this isn't just more Starlink. It's not about beaming internet down to remote places. No, this is something totally different. We're talking about a dedicated orbiting data center specifically for artificial intelligence. The plan is to stick these things in low Earth orbit, between 500 and 2,000 kilometers up, where they can just soak up near constant solar power. And here's the kicker. They wouldn't talk to the ground all that much. They'd be talking to each other, using laser links to create one giant computing network right above our heads.
But why? I mean, why build a data center in space? It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? It's gotta be unbelievably complex, not to mention expensive. So what problem is so huge, so unsolvable down here that building a 1 million satellite data center in orbit suddenly becomes the most logical solution? Well, the answer, according to SpaceX, isn't actually about the stars at all. It's right here on the ground. See, this incredibly futuristic vision, it's not just about exploring space for the sake of it. It's about solving a very real and, frankly, a very rapidly growing crisis right here on Earth. Look, the AI revolution is absolutely here, we're living in it. But it has a dirty secret. It runs on an immense amount of power. The data centers on the ground, the actual physical brains of the internet and AI, they are incredibly thirsty for electricity. They're putting a huge, huge strain on our electrical grids. And it's not just power. They also need massive, and I mean massive amounts of water for cooling. So as AI gets more and more powerful, its environmental footprint just gets bigger and bigger.
And right here, this is the core of SpaceX's whole argument. On Earth, data centers are straining our power grids and guzzling millions of gallons of water just to stay cool. But in orbit, well, the power is free and it's pretty much constant, direct sunlight. And cooling? The vacuum of space is the coolant. The satellites just radiate their extra heat out into the void. Problem solved, right?
And listen, this isn't just some green environmental argument. It's a straight-up economic one. SpaceX is betting big that with the reusable Starship rocket absolutely cratering the cost of getting to orbit, they can just bypass Earth's resource limits entirely. They actually believe that in just a few years, space will be the cheapest place to generate AI compute, that raw processing power that fuels the entire AI industry.
But this whole plan, it's about way more than just solving an energy problem. If you actually read the filing, you start to realize it's tied to a vision that is, and I'm not exaggerating, civilization defining. This isn't just about data centers anymore. This is about the future of humanity.
So to really get the scale of their ambition, we need to talk about a concept from theoretical physics called the Kardashev scale. It's actually pretty simple. It's a way of ranking civilizations based on how much energy they can control. A Type 1 civilization can use all the energy available on its home planet. A Type 2, well, a Type 2 can harness all the energy of its star, the whole sun. And here's where it gets really wild. In its own filing, SpaceX literally calls this project a first step toward becoming a Kardashev Type II civilization. Let that sink in. They see this orbital data center powered directly by the sun as the very beginning of humanity learning to harness the full power of our entire solar system. This is so much more than a business plan. It's a philosophical statement about where we're headed. But an ambition this grand doesn't come without equally grand risks. For every single breathtaking vision of a solar-powered future, there's a deep and growing concern about what a million new objects in orbit would actually do to the final frontier.
So let's go back to numbers for just a second. What does adding 1 million satellites to orbit really look like? What's the impact? Well, it looks like this: 67 times.
Yeah, 67 times. That's the increase we are talking about. This one single project would multiply the entire population of active satellites currently in orbit by a factor of 67. And this kind of unprecedented crowding, well, it raises the terrifying possibility of a catastrophe that scientists have been warning about for decades.
It's called the Kessler syndrome, and the idea is pretty simple and pretty scary. Once the number of objects in orbit gets dense enough, a single collision, just one accident, could create a cloud of debris. That debris then smashes into other satellites, creating even more debris, setting off a runaway chain reaction that could effectively create a wall of junk around our planet, locking us out of space for generations. It would make entire orbits just unusable.
So, beyond the very real physical risk of space debris, this project forces us all to ask a much more profound question. And it's not about technology or orbital mechanics, it's about our collective relationship with the cosmos itself. You see, a project this huge really creates a kind of psychological split. On the one hand, you've got this incredible frontier optimism, that classic human drive to explore, to overcome our limits. But on the other hand, there's a real risk of collective alienation, a fear that if humanity's most critical infrastructure is literally floating above our heads, the rest of us will just be left behind on a planet that's no longer the center of the action.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate ethical debate this proposal kicks off. It's a question that goes way beyond regulations and FCC filings. It gets right to the heart of what we consider to be a global commons, something that belongs to all of us.
And so this proposal really forces the issue. As SpaceX prepares to build the literal brains of artificial intelligence in orbit, we are all left with this fundamental question that is going to define the next era of human expansion. It's this: does any single corporation have the right to occupy our shared night sky? Who gets to decide? That's the real question.